Thank you so much today for joining us today at RIG Podcast. This is Isaiah Diesel, and we got a very interesting topic today. We normally talk about things related to God or politics or something like that, spirituality, but we're going in a totally different direction today. And I want to welcome back James for the second time. James, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. James, I got some good news and I got some bad news for you. Which one do you want first?
I'm open. Go for it.
Okay. So good news. No, so we'll start with the bad news first. Bad news is it's going to be a 3-on-1. It's going to be 3 Christians versus 1 atheist today. Okay. That's the bad news. You ready for the good news?
Sure.
I just saved a bunch of money by switching my car insurance to Geico. So that's something to look forward to. They probably actually don't even get that. Jack, it's in a car insurance commercial.
Okay.
Jack, yeah. Where are you calling out of, Jack?
Australia. Yep.
Oh, and I see some drums in the background.
Yeah, man. Yep.
Yeah.
I play drums.
And let's see. And Wolfgang, is that correct? Did I say your name?
Yep.
Where are you calling out of?
Thailand.
Thailand. But you are from Germany, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Originally, but I haven't been living in Germany for probably over 40 years.
All right.
He's an Aussie.
He's an Aussie.
Yeah,
And-
Aussie in Thailand.
Passports, German and Australian, yes, but I'm living in Thailand. Yeah.
And actually, I have a friend who has lived there for about 4 years, and he's a missionary there. James, can I ask you what your experience was? By the way, what are you drinking? I got a little lime beer. I told you I'd join you next time.
The new one this time, Velvet Rush.
Velvet Rush. All right. And can I tell you if you could give me your overall impression of the first interaction that we had on this podcast, if you wouldn't mind?
Sure. It was very enjoyable. I had my first time really being in front of a camera for like a podcast style thing. I did go back and watch it once with my girlfriend, and what I told you before, I think totally still applies. I cannot stand to hear myself talk, and I'm a blithering idiot whenever I do. So,
all right.
I look forward to more of the same.
All right. Well, because we have 4 people, we're just going to get right into this because we normally take some time to do some icebreakers, but I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak. So I do have some questions. I hope you guys got a chance to look at them. You guys can feel free to answer them. I will point some of you guys out to answer, but feel free to come in at any point, or if you have any questions yourself, you guys, please feel free to ask. Okay, is everybody ready?
Yep.
Is war ever justified? And we're going to start off with James.
I'm inclined to say no, but with an asterisk. And the reason I say no is because the way I view war, it's probably commensurate with how it's appeared in our lifetime and years past, where it's just the wholesale taking of lives, usually million lives, destruction of property, and then everybody has to rebuild afterwards. To me, it's senseless. It takes the lives of people who probably had nothing to do with it, weren't involved, didn't have a say, and the reasons for all of that seem to always be, I would call them flimsy. In years past, I'd say like before the age of information technology, wars were usually fought over resources or territory, obviously over religions, but specifically over resources and territory. That was a means of survival. So in that sense, it almost seems like either we kill them or they kill us. So I would be inclined to say in very extreme circumstances like those, you could say it's justifiable. But if you're the superior force and you start the war, I don't think there can be a justification. Because it seems the responsibility to find the peaceful resolution.
All right. And can I get your opinion, Jack? Union Jack.
Yeah, that was a great response. Thanks, James, for sharing that for us, man. That was great. So let's jump into the question: is war ever justified? I believe it is. Let's look at two sides. There's several conditions for a just war. I mean, we look at things like the Bible. Let's be declared by one's government. It must be in defense, of the innocent. We think about, standing up for other people's rights for innocence, against evil or aggressors, because everyone all has a different heart, I mean, it'd be great if the whole world got along. I mean, really, wouldn't that be fantastic? But, we live in a fallen world, everyone has, a different scale of morals and a different sense of right and wrong. But, there's several ways that war can be justified. Does it make it right? No, it doesn't. But in a sense of, we think about, justification, like what is that word? What is just? I only had a quick chance to sort of go through this. But, let's look at like governments going to war. That God would expect a nation to protect itself from force of evil outside its borders. Outside forces that would attempt to cause harm innocent people. We think about Old Testament. There was many times Israel had to defend itself from plundering onslaught of the Philistines. And dependent on Israel's obedience to God, God would allow Israel to either be victorious or to be defeated respectfully. There is a lot of reasons for a just war. Now, take in innocent bloodshed and those sorts of things. Now that's but within nations, we need to be able to protect people. Like we have a look at Afghanistan at the moment. There's several things like innocent blood being shed. For a number of reasons. With a justification would be to stand up for those the people. That don't have a voice or that's evil or being oppressed.
Right.
Yes.
That is a really well thought out answer. You must have taken a lot of time to reflect on that one. Really, I think that was very nice. A lot of people do look to the Old Testament and they use this as a source of criticism towards the Bible or Christians. But the way I like to tell people is that if you take a look at Genesis chapter 1, you see that nothing was meant to die to start off with. Not even animals. Animals were not created to eat other animals. Everyone was created to be vegetarian from the Bible's perspective. And then you have at the end, it says again, like in heaven, it says the lion and the lamb are going to eat straw together. So there's going to be like peace again in heaven. It talks about a child playing with a snake with his hand. And there's just going to be like it said a child's going to go into a viper's den. So it is like, it seems an unfortunate reality that for right now, like war, it just seems inevitable. Like it seems inevitable as long as we're here, as long as we have limited resources, as long as we can't fully understand the whole picture of everything that's going on. It seems that, I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but it does seem like that. I want to get to question number 2. What do you think about Christian just war theory? Have you ever heard of this concept before?
Yep,
Yeah,
I've got the question here. Sorry, got to get used to your accent here. I do have
my
many
accent.
American friends,
My
but-
accent.
I think we've all got
Got to
different
get used to
accents, all
mine.
of us, which makes it interesting.
Look, I just listening to this, maybe for you to understand me, I might just go back a little bit, sort of to the time when I grew up and right. So now from when I was a teenager and growing up from there, I was very much opposed to war. I obviously grew up, well, I was born 9 years after the end of the Second World War, right?
Right.
So we really didn't want to have anything this war.
Right.
Okay. And as I grew up, as a teenager, that was in the time of the Vietnam War, right? So which only really made these feelings stronger. So as I then grew up, the sort of banner under which many people of my generation were living was the banner of make love, not war. It was pretty much an international sort of a movement in those days, right? We just didn't want to go back to the old days.
Right.
where people were fighting all around the world, and where people were then fighting in Vietnam and many parts of Southeast Asia. Okay, so that's my background. And in amongst that background, I also refused military duties in Germany when I was younger. All right. And in a way, even now that I met Jesus long time ago, I still stick very much to these beliefs I always had. I'm very much against war, very much against violence, you know. And no, I just personally cannot imagine Jesus Christ running around with an MK-47 on his back. Right? It's just not a picture that appeals to me, right? So,
yeah.
Okay.
So
Now, having said that, right, there is another side that I often think about, but I cannot give you the answer. And that is, if the United States and Russia, England and France, right, would have not been fighting against Hitler, Germany in the Second World War, I might still stand there today and shout Heil Hitler.
right.
So that's the difficulty in amongst it all.
Thank you.
know,
I'm really glad that you're here joining us, and I'm really glad that you gave us that perspective right there. So I do want to transition and ask you this very specifically. I want to give some general ideas about what just war theory is. Okay, so I'll just there's a lot of points. There's probably like 10 or more, but some of the most obvious ones are like, one, you don't purposely attack civilians. Okay, that's one of the things you don't do. Second of all, that you want to have a reasonable chance of winning if you're going to engage in war. So for example, Mexico, under just war theory, under no circumstance should declare war on America, because they know they're just going to get themselves annihilated. And so there's an irrational part of that. Another thing that I think is really important as far as just war theory is that you have to have a response that is proportionate to whatever has been done against you. So for example, you might have some like border dispute, which is what Idi Amin did in Uganda. And he just sent the whole forces to go invade the next country. And it actually wind up leading to his downfall. But you have to have like if someone bombs like a plane, you can't go in and take over an entire country over something like that. Like, okay, if you're going to drop some bombs or something like that, it has to be somewhat proportionate, And yeah, those are some of the big ones. If you have anything else you want to add to that, Wolfgang, and yeah, just give me your opinion.
It's very difficult, like obviously I do know, especially being American, you very much look at the Old Testament and, like Jack said before, it is about war, but the Old Testament also is God's word to the Jews, right? Now, if I now look at the New Testament, I mean, the main command of Jesus is love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself, right? So we have these two opposite forces there. And then I suppose justification really does not ever come through war, but through Jesus Christ himself.
So another big one I should have pointed out is that you should either only engage in defensive wars or engage in a war to defend people. Okay, so defend, for example, you mentioned Afghanistan, you might have some genocide or something going on, which has happened in the past. And if that's going to happen, if you come in and stop the dictatorship with force, even though you're not being directly attacked, that would still be considered a defensive war. So I want to pass it over to James now with the next question is, because this goes against just war theory. James, so is killing civilians ever justified?
We live in an imperfect world. So unfortunately, I think the answer is yes. I think it's there's a test that psychologists give to kids. They'll have two train tracks where the path diverges. The train has to go down one of the paths. There's one person tied up on the train tracks on one path, and there's like 5 people tied up on the train tracks on the other path, and you have to choose which way the path goes. Either outcome is really abhorrent, but I think that's supposed to give psychologists some glimpse into the psychology of the child. I'm not sure for what reason. That's not really my field. But that's, I think, a wonderful analogy of war. I think the only reason why people back the idea of war is because they are trying to choose the path that goes over, but you have to pick a path. So do I ever think it's justified? If it were a perfect world, if the train didn't have to follow any tracks, I'd say no, but it does. So I think it has to be.
And so I want to kick it over to Jack, if you could answer that question as well. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Really appreciate that insight.
You know, I guess it's one of those things, you know, where, you know, if evil, you know, is around, it really, unfortunately, it really stems down to people. You know, in war, unfortunately, there will be civilians. You know, does it justify it? You know, unfortunately, you know, it comes down to, you know, sometimes they may be collateral. You know, I think what you were saying before, Isaiah, when you were saying about, you know, you know, proportionality and, you know, probability. I think a lot of that comes into, you were saying was, you know, Mexico. You know, I mean, it is foolish to enter into a war if there is a, you know, unless there is a high probability of success, you know, with those sorts of things. You know, it also comes down to, you know, will the war objectives be greater than the losses that would inevitably occur, you know, from pursuing a war? You know, for me, I go back to a lot of the New Testament. You know, I mean, this is a scripture out of Luke. Or what king, when he sets out to meet another king in battle, will not first sit down and consider whether he is strong enough with 10,000 men to encounter the one coming against him with 20,000? You know, does it make it okay with civilians? You know, I don't think it does. You know, the facets of war, though, these are things that that do happen, whether, you know, oppressors or, you know, or being, you know, whether they're oppressed or being the oppressor, unfortunately.
I want to get in on this for a second. By the way, who mentioned the trolley? Which one of you did?
I guess that was me.
Oh, that's actually completely brilliant. But I will say this, I want to break this up for a second, because there's all kinds of like memes that have come out about different ways. Like, have you seen those? One is like, okay, this one, you can pull this lever, but it has like a 30% chance of killing everyone, but like 70%, I don't know. There's a lot of different scenarios because that particular scenario, they've played with a lot of different ones, right? Like what if it's 5 criminals, right? Like, what if it's 5 criminals, or you can kill just one civilian or one child? There's lots of different things, but I saw it.
Dexter, the Waters. One of my favorite versions of that is there was, I think it was like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. Some parents, they were videoing their child and they presented the problem, and the child picked up the one person on the one tracks, put it onto the other
Oh God!
Train and ran.
God.
Problem solved.
Oh God!
I thought it was great.
So actually, I saw this one. I just want to throw this out there. It's the train is running over a bunch of people, and it says, "You can." This is the capitalist one. You can stop the train at any time, but in doing so, will disrupt service and wind up causing your company to lose profits. Right. All right. Anyway, so as far as killing civilians, I do want to say this. I think he did touch on a good point, and so did Jack, because the reality is that whenever you have a total war going on, which is what we were experiencing in World War II, is that like not killing civilians wasn't an option. You know, it's like it wasn't even in the equation, and so to actually end the war took 200,000 Japanese people. But they did the calculations and they said these Japanese people, they're not likely to just give up. And this is actually, I didn't want to go down this route the first time. You saw me biting my tongue, James. because I was like, well, you have a group of people who have like a samurai or kamikaze mentality. They're like, we're going to fight you to the very end. And it doesn't matter if it's been clear that we're going to lose for the last 5 or 6 months. We're still going to keep fighting you no matter what. So using something like the atomic bomb was just like, okay, you guys are going to lose. And you have to decide right now, you know? And so when it got to that point, the calculations that, you know, this wind up saving hundreds of thousands of lives. But yeah, unfortunately, sometimes you cannot get around it. And that's an unfortunate reality. So that being said, here we go. This is going to be an interesting situation for you, James, because just to give you some preference, some background for this, in South Korea, where I live, there's actually a lot of in North Korea, there's actually a lot of U.S. bodies that are still there from the war. Okay, so they kind of have these negotiations every now and again, and the United States really wants to get those bodies back. But interesting enough, my Canadian co-host told me that if a Canadian dies on a battlefield, like in Europe, whatever, says they get buried there. And I think that's just a totally different way of thinking about the situation, right? So I want to get your ideas about that, about being repatriated, or does it make sense to bury someone where they've fallen? Go ahead.
Well, you pointed out that right at the beginning that I'm the atheist in the room.
Right.
I don't attach a lot of meaning to the body, even though my thoughts are the body and what came from the body, or all that's there. If I kind of like what Neil deGrasse Tyson said about it, if he were to die and his method of disposal of his body, like be it cremation or scattering the ashes at sea, or just burying the body, his response was to bury the body so that his earth may dine off of its nutrients, just as he dined off the nutrients of the earth while he was alive. I like that. I think that's pretty poetic, but I don't know if that's something that I really care about that much. I just don't. I attach more meaning to the experiences that I have with the person in life. So for someone to lose their life in battle, in war, overseas, or in another location, in terms of repatriation, if it's important to the family,
Mm-hmm.
if it's important to the country, I'm all for it. I'll back it. But it's ultimately, for me, I don't care.
So to follow that line of reasoning, had you died on the battlefield, would you prefer just to be cremated? Because you were telling me about how you like the idea of being like a funeral pyre, like just sending the body off maybe into the ocean on it.
Yeah, the Vikings. Yeah. Well, funerals are not for the dead. Funerals are for the living. It's for people to grieve, to come together, to comfort each other. The dead has no never mind about it. They're not conscious. I guess my understanding of religion, it doesn't matter what that lens is. The dead really is an element there, because they've already passed and they're exploring the whole world in the afterlife. I like the honoring of the dead, the remembrance, the appreciation of the times that have passed. But yeah, in terms of what to do with the remains, I honestly just don't care.
All right. Well, thank you for at least the honesty. And I want to kick this next question over to you, Jack, because you're an Aussie, and I think you guys are probably a little bit more peaceful than your average people. So I want to ask you, the only fighting you guys usually do are like against crocodiles, right?
Yeah, and a few big kangaroos that, trying to step up on us. No.
We do fight on the side of the US Army just the same. Vietnam, Afghanistan. Okay.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so do you have any thoughts about how the UN or maybe just the world could end war? Do you have any thoughts on that?
When will sin you know, stop in the world? I mean, that's my question. You know, I guess, you know, if we left everyone to have their own compass of what's wrong or right, you know, everyone at some point, people are going to disagree. You know, people are going to want power. People are going to want, you know, empires. People are going to want to build kingdoms. And what comes along with that is, you know, disagreements, war. Yeah. So, you know, how do we end wars? Well, it's, you know, it's really I mean, wouldn't the world be great if we all sat around the campfire and sing Kumbaya and loved one another? Like, you know, Jesus says to love one another. I mean, wouldn't it be great, you know?
And pet koalas. Pet koalas.
Yeah, pet koalas and just, you know, but dude, unfortunately, we live in a fallen world, you know, that it's from, you know, from the very beginning of creation, as Adam and Eve sinned and introduced, you know, this spiritual, you know, this death, spiritual death, physical death into this world. You know, we've seen history of just wars repeating itself, and humans just have this good tendency to never learn. We just keep repeating the same things, and you know, so I mean, if you ask me how do we end wars, I guess, you know, let's put the question back to people. How would you be a better person to your brother and sister? You know, it starts with you guys. How can you influence communities to love one another? You know, and that for me, I've been a Christian the last just over 12 months. For me, that compassion, that empathy, and that love comes from knowing Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. Yeah, and that's my experience. But dude, you know, you asked that question, and you know, I think, you know, that's it's everybody's heart, man. That's where you got to start.
Well, I will say this. So I'm a Christian, but I also do think that we need to take into consideration like things like sociology, biology, economics, and kind of understand some of these the sources of why we are engaging in wars. So, because there's a psychology. I mean, if you read the Art of War, it goes so much into the psychology. I mean, the Art of War is an absolute brilliant book, just in terms of the psychology, you know. So just try to understand why we feel this need to divide ourselves, you know, whether it's from football teams, we get it, basketball teams. There's always this us versus them rivalry mentality that it serves us, like, just from the time that we're kids. It's kind of a boring story if you just have one, you know, one team or a plot where, let's say, like Adam and Eve. If Adam and Eve never ate the fruit in the Garden of Eden, that'd be a pretty boring story, just watching them, you know, be in the garden forever. So having conflict, it seems like something that's inevitable, that we want to see the conflict resolution. If you know anything about storytelling, that's what it always comes. You have to have a plot, conflict resolution, and then kind of like a crescendo of where it comes to a head. So
I just quickly want to say something on that. Does it also start when we have a sense of our reality around us? Like, let's take an example. Two, you know, a girl and a boy that are brother and sister, and they're 3 and 4, and one's got a ice cream and the other doesn't, and they don't know any, you know, moral right or wrong. But, you know, the boy goes, "Oh man, my sister's got that ice cream. I want that," and goes to grab it, and then the sister goes and whacks him. You know, it doesn't have a sense of what they're actually doing, but all they know at that time is, "Hey, I want that." And, you know, is that an act of war and aggression? They aren't influenced. They're not bought into this society that says, you know, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, but this is right. It's, hey, I want that. And it's like, you know, it's mine, whack. Like, you know, that's sort of, you know, it's where it starts. It's just bred into us.
There you go.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. And I want to kick it over to Wolfgang.
I don't think there's any really easy answer to the whole aspect. But look here, obviously, I mean, Jack is right. You know, there is the nature of man that all the problems started with from the beginning, from creation. You know, Adam and Eve. You know, the fruit and so on, the fall. Now, I don't think, you know, there is a real easy solution to it. Even though, I mean, I do for myself continuously object to wars. But I mean, the only thing really I can see is that sometime in the future, if we believe in Jesus Christ, well, we know that he will return. And that is probably the only time when there's ever going to be any change. You know, like, I mean, there will be wars, and the Bible tells us that, and I mean, we see that. You know, I mean, if we
Yeah.
don't have wars in our own country, I mean, you know, there'll be somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, you know, like here we are in Thailand, you know, it's the war just in Myanmar next door, you know.
Right, Myanmar. Yeah, I live in South Korea, so just to give you a little background, in the Korean War, 90% of South Korea got destroyed. And if you look at a map, North Korea actually invaded all the way down to the bottom, which is called Pusan. And so they set up like a Pusan perimeter. Then what happened is the United States wound up brilliantly attacking, basically cutting off the troops and then killing the rest of the people here. And then they wind up going into North Korea and were even threatening to go into China. So the point of that, though, is that almost all of Korea got destroyed. So as tragic as it was, the only good thing about that is that they got to rebuild from the ashes, kind of like with Germany. You know, Germany basically got destroyed after World War II. And now they're within the top like 5 economically rich countries in the world. So the idea to rebuild the Marshall Plan is something I think that I think we learned from the lessons of the First World War, where we said, you guys were in the wrong, we're going to punish you, to the point that someone like Adolf Hitler could arise. You know, had we treated Germany with respect and with dignity after World War I, which, okay, everyone messes up, okay? Countries mess up, America messes up, Vietnam, Afghanistan, everybody messes up. But I think that's part of where we go to as far as ending war. I mean, we can have, even if there is a war and there does need to be damages, for instance, in the form of repaying loans or things like that. Yes, we can settle these things, but we should not look to like crush the other side, right? We should not look, we should allow people to have their dignity. We did the same thing with Japan by allowing them to keep their emperor. And now they're a very rich country. So I think even though we had to drop a nuclear bomb on them, we're still now at this point allies, and we have bases there. And you know, I can go there as an American, and it's a great place to visit. So that being said, actually the next question is, and everyone's going to answer this one, but I guess we'll start off with James again. Is war inevitable? Meaning there's no way to stop it. What do you think?
Unfortunately, we're imperfect people. We are, I mean, for the most part, slaves to our emotions, our biology. There's limited resources. There's all sorts of reasons. I think ultimately war is inevitable. My girlfriend might hate me for that answer. I think she believes we're at a point with information technology that war should be completely outdated. It should be a thing of the past. It should be deemed so stupid that no one should ever entertain it for a moment. And I would like to wholeheartedly agree with that. But I mean, I think there's a reason the United States puts so much of their budget towards the military. I think it's just inevitable.
All right. Well, thank you for that, and kick it over to Jack.
Yeah, absolutely. War is inevitable. Unfortunately, you know, do we like war? No, we don't. You know, Jesus said, "Blessed is the peacemakers." You know, but you know, we still will endure wars. You know, it's like, you know, you have, let's take an example. You know, a country in the Middle East that might be quite poor. You know, it has a leader being put in place. You know, he wants to take care of the people. UN or agencies might, you know, like want to try to help that country. The president and the leadership want to take that money and not put it back to their people, which we've seen, you know, time and time again. You know, it could be, and then another country that want to stand up and defend the people, or, you know, it's just, it's always just this ongoing thing. Yes, war is inevitable. There's always going to be evil people in charge. There's always going to be people who is, you know, intense, or unfortunately, you know, it's just, as I said before, it just comes back to how people's hearts are. There's always going to be someone that wants power, someone that wants to build a kingdom, a collective group, allies, enemies. Yeah, does it make it right? No, it doesn't. But is it inevitable and that things are going to happen? With war, yes, it does. History just shows us that time and time and time again.
I actually have read that in the course of that we've been able to keep track of history and wars and stuff, there's only been something like 4 years where no war actually took place. And most of the time you got like 20 or 30 conflicts that are going on. So
that's right. There's always war. Nothing can end it or gave a brief. Maybe another interesting question, which may lead in the wrong direction, would be, are wars always going to be fought the way they are being fought now? And even if we look at the war strategies of, say, over the last 50 years, there's also been a significant change that,
right.
War was more sort of fought by armies on land that fought against each other, while sort of looking at it in recent times, I may be wrong, it's not one of my favorite subjects, but it seems that, like the US Army sort of seems to more drop bombs rather than actually fight, which is a different strategy. Of course, looking at the time since the Second World War, one could then argue, well, does that work? But anyway, look, ultimately, yes, there will be wars. And of course, would wars be fought by other means in the future? Like, China's more talking about wars with biological weapons,
right.
wars and
cyber,
so,
all that sort of stuff.
cyber, yes, it's another way. So yeah, but yes, I think it would be nice if we could end wars, but I think that's up to God.
Has anybody here seen Avatar, the movie?
Yeah.
Yep.
I've been waiting 10 years for part 2 to come. I don't know what's taking so long, but actually I've heard that movie's going to cost after everything's done and said, it's going to cost $1 billion to make totally. But anyway, in the first part, the guy, who's an Australian, he's an Aussie, Sam Wentworth, right? That's the main actor, right? Who pulls off an amazing American accent, I might say. So does that Bloom character, Orlando Bloom. But in the movie, he's like crippled, and so he's able to control like an avatar, not the avatar, but like a drone soldier at the beginning. That's like one of the first scenes of the movie. So yeah, I think the idea of traditional warfare in which you meet someone on the battlefield with guns or bayonets, that seems totally obsolete in these days. It might just come down to technology, or as you said, biological. I see James smiling over there. I'll let you get in on that one, James.
Well, it's interesting to say that. I was thinking about this beforehand. There was the old school Star Trek show, the original series. There was an episode where the spaceship says, hey, to this planet, and then they beam down, and this planet seems like super peaceful and everything, and they're like greeting with like all their higher ups and stuff, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, you're actually in a war zone right now, and your ship into this thing, and we've got like this computer that simulates this whole battle thing, and I guess your ship is now a casualty, so all of the people on your ship need to beam down to our planet and walk into these suicide booths because now they're casualties of war.
Oh my God.
Fire, nothing like that. And they thought this was like the cleanest solution because like there's no property damage or anything like that. But then they still have the weight of loss of life of war. And they thought this was like the more civilized version of what future warfare would be.
That is fascinating. Was it the Shatner one?
Yeah, William Shatner. Yeah.
Wow, that is a crazy plot twist right there. You get beamed down, and hey, you guys are now casualties of war. That is, yeah. I do want to go into one little side tangent, because if you read the book 1984, which I'm sure you have, right? I'm sure Wolfgang has, but have you, Jack?
Yeah.
What was that? Sorry.
1984.
The book.
Yes.
I haven't read it. No, I've heard
Okay.
of it. Is that George Orwell?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yep.
So one of the most fascinating things that happens in that book is the character, no spoiler alerts, but the main character's name is Winston. He winds up getting his hand on the playbook of like the opposition. And they talk in there about why they're creating war, okay? Because they said ultimately, it doesn't really matter. Like, you don't need to have a war. It says you could have the equivalent of taking like a bunch of goods and just putting them down and just blowing them up. And I said it would cause the same kind of level of war, which is to build this kind of level of fear and scarcity that they're trying to do in order to keep control. Because if you think about this, the United States has always had someone to contrast itself with for the last, like, since World War II. First, it was the Nazis, we're the exact opposite of Nazis. Then we're the exact opposite of the communists. Now we're the exact opposite of the Islamic terrorists. So it's like you have to have this thing that you can point to say it's that over there that will allow us to carry out our agenda of whatever we want to do. Kind of like, I just interviewed my a foster brother that I had, and he was talking about how in our hometown there was like this very big scandal that went down, and he was saying that he thought it was like it was a manufactured scandal, okay? And he was saying that he thought that this went down to like take attention away from this other stuff that was going down. And so war can serve its purpose for a government virtually like nothing else. You know, nothing else could rally people around a cause or to get people to give up their lives. You know what I mean? And that's actually our last question here, is that if it's honorable to die on the battlefield. And really, like in America, that's like the highest honor you can think of, right? Dying on the battlefield, getting buried in Arlington. And so it's a very powerful thing. So whenever you understand how much power that wields, it is pretty unlikely to see it cease, because it has a lot of utility for the people who want to use it. You know, it can serve to benefit a very small select few. So the last question I do want to ask you, everyone, is it honorable to die on a battlefield?
You said that was considered to be like a very high honorable thing in America. I don't know if that's the case. I think it's said. Maybe it's insinuated or alluded to, but I don't know if that's actually the mindset of most of Americans. I think most Americans they would rather have a father at home or a mother at home. I think caring for the next generation is, I would say that is perhaps considered the more honorable thing. But to directly respond to the question, is it honorable to die on a battlefield? I think absolutely. If you believe in the message, if you believe what you're fighting for is right, is necessary, and is worth your life, I would say the things that America was built on, a lot of the pillars that the things that form the Bill of Rights, the whole right to religion, the right to speech, the right to free press, the right to a fair trial, all of those things, I think, forming the backbone of the society, those are things that are those are noble and worthy of fighting for and dying for. And I would absolutely say that is the height of honorable.
Right.
But like going to Kuwait and then fighting for oil. Dude, how many soldiers would say, yes, this is honorable? We're fighting over black tar out of the earth. That's I don't know. I'm not there. I can't say, hey, we're fighting over this goop that oozes out of the ground. I'm not there. I can't say this is honorable. That's the problem with wars. You're fighting for someone else's agenda. If you took a singular battle, a singular scenario where you're in competition with someone else, and you took the reason for it completely out of the equation, I think you could look at the conduct of the people involved, and the heart, the drive, the confidence, the effort and energy, and you could say there is honor in this. But as soon as you zoom out and see what the reason for it all is, it just makes it disgusting. It in terms of something like fighting over oil fields. Do I think there's honor on the battlefield? Yes, but only when it's on the terms of the people involved, and not the people who were sitting in the cushy desks at home.
Yeah, that's a great response, James. Thank you. Yeah, that was really good. You know, I think being on the battlefield, you know, I mean, let's look at, you know, conscription, conscientious. You know, I'm just trying to think. You know, like an American person, I think they had the It's that movie. What was that? That movie. Where he didn't want to pick up a weapon. He was a conscientious objector.
Oh, I was gonna say Brokeback Mountain. No, I think Brokeback Bridge. Brokeback Mountain. That's a totally different. That's something totally different. They didn't mind picking up things in that one, in that movie, but Broken Ridge. Yeah,
Broken. I'm gonna have to Google it, but I think for our viewers, we'll just it was a movie that had a young guy that, you know, believed that he shouldn't have picked up a weapon, and he was a conscientious objector, which means he was still able to participate in war, but, you know, he didn't believe in actually firing a rifle, and that was his own conscientious decision, which the government actually respected. Now, we haven't had that for, you know, not every country has that. We look at, you know, countries that, you know, if you had you were marching a hill towards the enemy and you had turned around, you were shot as a coward because you were a traitor to your nation. Where, you know, that in turn wouldn't really give any honor or glory to the family. We look at Japanese soldiers. My grandfather fought in World War II against the Japanese. You know, their ideal of honor was, you know, for them to bow on their own swords. Wow. And that sword was given back to the family, with their actually had their imprinted, like generals had their imprinted initials and family name on these swords. Wow. To be given that was a great honor. To not come home as a survivor of war was a cowardly act in Japan. So look, I guess the point I'm making, there's many different aspects to that. You know, for me, you know, what defines, you know, let's look at valor. You know, someone who risks his life, you know, let's say in a you know, Middle Eastern war to save 3 or 4 of his comrades, you know, they were pinned down or something, you know, that is that's really honorable, because that's a, you know, the self-sacrificing mentality that this person has. You know, I don't believe that, you know, someone that's on the you know, in the battlefield, that doesn't really define who they are. I think, you know, as people all made in the image of God, it's how we leave this earth as an impression with what we do, you know. Wow. Whether we fight for, you know, unfortunately, whether we're, you know, conscripted or we've joined, volunteered to defend our nation, whether that's under any sort of conflict. You know, I think, you know, I mean, our measurable actions and thoughts and what we do to other people, ultimately, for the people around us, defines and shapes us. But for me, the biggest thing is how God sees me, you know, how God sees us, because we all know in the times of eternity, we're a grain of sand, you know. Right, let's look at a big massive rope, you know. For me, you know, whether, you know, I sort of think for me, like a lot of things come to mind, you know, where I seek to do things to give God the glory in everything that I do. You know, whether that's on a battlefield, whether that's, you know, helping the neighbor down the street, or just, you know, showing empathy and compassion. But, you know, there's many different aspects you can throw that question down. But, you know, I really think it's, you know, it's, you know, I just think you can find in any situation, you know, any good or anything that is notably worthy in a sense.
Yeah, you know what? So, a couple of things I want to say, and then I'm going to give, I'll give it over to Wolfgang. But that's a lot. First of all, thank you very much, James. I warned you that you're coming here with 3 Christians, so I don't want to see you rolling your eyes over there at all. But you know, a couple of things. First of all, there's this idea, like if you were to give like a bum like $1 or something, he might turn around and buy like a beer or something with it. But the reality is that you've done a good act. You know, you've done a good act, and what that person chooses to do with it is something else altogether. And so, for me, I think if you're laying down your life, like the Bible says, there's no greater love than a man lay down his life for a friend. So, even the Germans who died, let's say in World War II, fighting under a totally false and insidious and evil regime and ideology, they still, in some sense of the word, they gave up their life for their country. Now, obviously, it was a horrible thing, the way that their government sought to abuse it, but they sacrificed their life on the battlefield. So I think that's something to be taken like seriously, because when I see people, family members, or who have family members who have died, or like one of my friends' wife had a relative die, or her first husband actually. And so these people make outrageous sacrifices, you know, and so to acknowledge that the sacrifices that people have had to give, even when they go and serve. Like my cousin went and served in Iraq, and he came back, but his mind did not come back. You know, it took years and years to readjust. So for me, when I see a soldier out in the streets, in a coffee shop, I will always go up to them and buy them a coffee and let them know how much I appreciate their service, even if it's a policeman, because these people do not get the proper recognition that they deserve. And they're putting their lives out on the line every day.
Yep.
So I think it's something that, as civilians who've never been in that position, you know, it's easy for us inside of air conditioner to say how we would respond in certain situations behind a computer or a phone. But the reality is that these people have had to live through that, you know. And if you watch the movie Saving Private Ryan, the guy in there, Upham, he's like a translator, and he doesn't really want to be fighting, and it finally gets to a point where he actually does have to do some fighting, but everyone's looking at there like, what a wimp, like what a wuss, because there's one opportunity he actually has to watch one of his guys get killed because he's afraid to do anything. And this is something that happened, even if you didn't want to freeze up and what they would call cowardice, you have no idea how you would respond in a situation if you would freeze
That's
up,
right.
if your finger would even be able to pull a trigger to actually kill people, you know. Because even if you do that, as my cousin, he had to live with the nightmares of actually seeing guys' heads blown out and stuff like that. So it's something that we should, you know, even if they maybe died for the wrong cause, it's something that they have sacrificed their lives. And unfortunately, there are dictators who will abuse that, you know. So Wolfgang, since you might have the most.
It's very important what you said there. Like, you know, when many people come home from the Vietnam War, they were really looked down upon in Australia very much, even though, you know, they had a lot of problems to settle in, a lot of problems with drug and alcohol abuse and. And I mean, the whole problem really, I think James really looked at it from a very important angle. You know, if I understood you right, you said that wars are usually fought by sort of political and other interests than the interests of necessarily the person who's fighting there. Is that right? There's political and other, or you said earlier on, religious ideas there that drive wars. Okay. Now, and I think that really then becomes the problem that very often people are fighting in wars that are really driven by political agendas, by economic agendas, and therewith these people are really in a way abused by other people for them. Like thinking of, you know, from an Australian perspective, every year we celebrate the Australian and New Zealand forces that went to Turkey in the First World War, and a lot of them died. No, I mean, it was, looking at history books, actually pretty obvious that these poor Australians were really more or less used as cannon fodder by the British.
Wow.
They really had very little value, you know, right from the start, okay? So there have always been powers that have been abusing people in wars right from the beginning of history. So there is the problem of honor is very relative. You know, I mean, you know, as you said before, Isaiah, you know, like, you know, Hitler would have given some honor to the people that died for him, right? But say Russia and America definitely would have not, but they gave honor to the people who fought them, right? So now, interestingly, from a Christian perspective, you may not be aware of that, but during the Second World War in Australia, churches generally were supporting soldiers going into war. But the Assembly of God that I'm part of actually did object the Second World War and did not want their members to fight there, because they actually realized that, you know, fighting there really did do very little for building the kingdom of God, right? Now, from a German perspective, I could put a different angle on that, as I mentioned before. But so, you know, ultimately for myself, the only honor, objective honor, if I want to call it like that, is really the honor that God will give to a person.
Wow.
So ultimately, the only fight we should ever fight really is for the kingdom of God, which really, and you know, basically, the word of God is a message of hope, a message of love, right?
Yeah.
So it's only really these agendas that we are really only able to honorably fight for.
Actually, I had wanted to say something about the battle. We actually have a war raging inside of ourselves. James, you're probably going to hate this, but actually the book of James talks about a battle that's taking place inside of us. And so sometimes being a casualty on that battlefield, which is overcoming the bad things that we all want to do. We all have the evil inclinations inside of us. So that's actually the proper context of what jihad is for the Muslims, is the internal battle that you have to overcome that. And I want to give James, I want to give you one last word because we've been speaking a lot. So give you one last thought.
I just wanted to add to what Wolfgang was saying when he said that honor is relative. I agree 1,000%. It's interesting that you say that, because I am more inclined to think that there is more honor to be gained when you're on the losing side than anything else, because I think that's when you're really putting your chips on the table. You're really you're willing to sacrifice everything. Go ahead.
No, sorry, James. Continue. Sorry, mate.
Oh, that was a good place for me to.
Mate.
Go ahead.
Mate means friend, by the way. Just he's not.
Oh, okay.
Mate means friend. I wanna close off with one last thought, guys. Probably about 5 months before I became a Christian, I was in Israel, and I was drinking, smoking weed, getting tattoos of other religions and stuff on me, and very far away from Jesus Christ. But I had this opportunity where I went out into a desert, and I took a couple of oranges and like a liter, I guess you guys would say like a liter of water. I don't know how much that is in regular. I'm just kidding. I have some
like
water with me.
1.23 gallons.
Okay, well, you actually know. Okay, so I actually just wind up walking into like the abyss of this desert, and probably about like 3 or 4 hours of not seeing anything, I had this like revelation, like, why do Jews greet each other with the expression shalom, which means peace, or the Muslims with assalamu alaikum, like peace be upon you, or in South Korea we say annyeonghaseyo, which means like, are you at peace, or go in peace. And I had this revelation that these are 3 places that are not known for being peaceful. South Korea, in fact, is still technically at war with North Korea. They just have an armistice signed. But when I started to examine that about how much I had wanted to promote peace in the world, I came to this revelation that I was not at peace with myself. Like, I couldn't forgive myself for the things of my past. I was so uncomfortable with who I was as a person. But I knew in that moment I could not for a second try to go out and promote peace anywhere else without addressing the peace in my life that I needed, because I would be a hypocrite if I'm trying to promote peace in another country or amongst other people and I lack peace inside of my life. I knew that something was wrong there. And I had no idea that 5 months later, I was going to have an experience with Jesus Christ that would change my life. But the point of that is that that's where we need to start with as far as peace goes, is becoming peaceful within ourselves, addressing our past, addressing our issues, because societies are created from a collection of individuals. So if you have a bunch of people who are not at peace, they're going to elect people who are not at peace. And then those are the kind of people who are going to want to lead us to war. So I think it starts first and foremost with us. And I really strongly believe that. And I really strongly want to thank all of you three for joining us. We're calling from different countries around the world. And I really want to thank you for your time. And with that being said, be sure to visit our website at www.rhepodcast.com. Check us out on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, you name it, Spotify, we're on it. And yeah, leave us a comment below if there's another topic you'd like to see us discuss, or if you'd like to come on as a guest. We're always looking for new guests to come on. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you back again. Goodbye.